Welcome to All Things World War II, the podcast, episode 1. I am joined by my co-host, Carlos Mendes, who is from Portugal. I guess I would call him an artist. I don't know if you have a different, a more specific way of referring to yourself.
No, that's it. Hi, everybody. Yeah, that's it. Artist is good enough.
Today I want to talk about, we'll do a recap of the news stories, and then I have the topic is kind of a mix of two things, which is being from a neutral country and being, a fan is the wrong word, but being into World War II and being from a country that wasn't involved, and the history of Portugal during the war in general.
Well, I would just premise all that with officially not involved.
Yeah. That's kind of the interesting part of it, because if you said Sweden, I mean, we're supposed to get to this afterwards, but if you said Sweden wasn't involved, that's not necessarily true either, right? If you're smuggling Norwegian resistance fighters back to England all the time, you know. So,
yeah, you have a leg. You have a sort of a leg.
Okay, so we'll go back through the news stuff. Hopefully I'm loud enough. In the order. So the first video I put up was the Overlord trailer. Now, I didn't want to put it up because I watched it and I read the comments and I saw that everyone was saying what I was saying, and I thought, well, are you just being an ass, or is this actually worth saying? So actually, you and I talked about it, and your point was if you find the real information, it's worth talking about. And I did. I found way more than I expected to.
Yes, you did. I watched it.
Yeah.
I watched it, and
the stories.
You know, the information actually surprised me a lot.
Too.
And it surprised me because in a way I feel that you were right. It detracts from the real people who later were actually the first black paratroopers in U.S. history. Like, why not tell these guys this story?
Well, because you can't put zombies in it. So it surprised me that it was the first, that they got folded into the 82nd, which was the first then desegregated unit. I had no idea that paratroopers were the first desegregated troops. So you have no way of really stumbling on that unless you're looking for it, I guess. It seems like their story isn't terribly well known. If you Google the Triple Nickels, that's what they call themselves. It's primarily a veterans organization of their own, like those guys, like the few of them that kept the things up, kind of like Dick Winters did with the Easy Company. They did their own PR. They had their own meetings, and they've tried to push their story, but because they didn't get to see combat, I think that, you know, anybody else that heard it would be like, oh, it's fighting fires. That's weird. And then it's really interesting, though. I never knew that we had deployed anyone to fight against did you know about the Japanese balloon bombs? I can't remember where I learned it. This is years ago on the TV documentary, actually, but they didn't do anything. But they were really...
Nothing. They started a few forest fires, apparently.
They're not even sure of that, actually.
So... But they know. I think they know for sure that they reached continental U.S.
Some. It's just,
but damages were like meaningless.
But the guys, there's a couple different versions of that story that I read, and apparently one version was by the organization, and it said they thought they could do the same, so they pushed to get the training. And then another version said white senior officers decided to do it. So it's hard to tell. You know what I mean? Because of the nature of the country at that time, were we hiding that the black guys wanted to do it, or are they boasting? It's hard to, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. I mean, like for the trailer itself and it means in the overall picture, don't get me wrong. Absolutely. It means something. Like if we talk about what do you call them? The Tuskegee Airmen, right? So their commanding officers, like their main, like the highest ranking commanding officers were white still, right?
Usually, Am I right? I don't know a ton about Tuskegee, but I assume because
I have this idea, like so let me preface, I don't really know for sure, but I have this idea that they're like the highest ranking officers were white, but everyone else, like from major downward, everyone was
it
black.
Could be only NCOs, but I think there were officers as well, because I actually think to be a pilots in general, they're officers anyway.
Yes, exactly. So, like, I know for sure the lieutenants, probably captains and majors, were black as well. I don't know. Due to the context of the time, like, if we're talking in the bigger picture, it matters.
Yes.
Basically.
Well, it was just so. Anyway, back to the trailer part of it.
Yes.
the things that really struck me, that made me make the video, I never would have looked into the 555th, but it was the drafting and the lack of training, because I think everyone's seen Band of Brothers. I talked to someone that hadn't the other day, but most people have seen it, and there's an entire hour-long episode about their 2 years of training. I thought that was kind of common knowledge. It's Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, not like a little indie thing. So,
exactly. Agreed. And also one of the most successful HBO series ever. Period.
And then so J.J. Abrams worked with Steven Spielberg, so I know he knows who he is. So it's like, have you not seen his work? No, Abrams produced Overlord, or he had something to do with the executive part of making it. It's not like he directed it or had anything to do with writing it. Now, I read, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this in the thing, but I read the names of the screenwriters, and one of them like wrote the screenplay for The Revenant. Like, they're not nobodies. Each guy, like the director and the screenwriter, both have one credit that's like amazing, and then the rest of their credits are crap. So it's I didn't really look into them a whole lot, but I am a big film person, so I thought that was interesting. Each one was attached to a very, very impressive name, and then this. So I don't know. It's weird.
Just a little comment on that. I think, say what you want for Spielberg and Tom Hanks, both in Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, and all that, all those productions that stem from that era, including Medal of Honor, by the way,
heavily involved with
which is an offshoot. Yeah. So say what you want about them. They care about history in a way that you don't see often.
Not anymore, I don't think. And I don't mean to sound like an old man, but if you look at Spielberg's backstory. There's actually a really good documentary about him on HBO, I want to say. He used to shoot in like boneyards. He would shoot World War II movies with a Super 8 when he was a kid. That's his dad's generation, and he's Jewish. So it makes a lot of sense why he would have.
His dad fought in Burma too, so he was involved.
And then Tom Hanks, I don't know why he cares so much.
He's just a World War II buff. He's like us. He is like us, but probably to a bigger level.
Well,
access.
Money does that to you.
Yeah. Now then let me just good point. Let me just say one thing. Then it could have been that it was the work of Dale Dye. I mean, that's the only other key in this.
Yeah, he was a huge part of all of their projects, including Medal of Honor, actually, and then.
All of them, like he's been on all of those movies. He actually features in most of them as a secondary character.
But let's say that we're kind of off the point of the horror movie, but let's say that you're making a movie in 1998. So they would have been filming in 97. You'd need a Dale Dye in 97. But nowadays, they could have just Googled Black Paratrooper, and then it would have said, dude, that's what I did. And it's like right there. So fine. So all that's fine. I think the point is the information's there, and a lot of people think we're silly, or that I'm silly, for caring, but it just doesn't make any sense. Ignoring the social justice part. It should be normal to see black actors in all roles, not in period pieces. But then they use the thing of it's a fantasy horror movie, and I'm like, well, what does that change about our history? Nothing. But like. What's your take on historical fiction? Like Inglourious Bastards I don't like it because it's so. What annoys me about movies like Inglourious Bastards and other things like that is that I feel like the people that write them don't understand that people who are informed on the war see things rather clearly. This happened at this time, things look like this. Then there was this, and after that, nothing looked like it did before. And so there are large events, just like there are now. And it's easier for people like us to see it. We're like, oh, well, in 43, blah, 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 blah. And so when they set these movies up and they're not really informed, it's like playing telephone. Like they heard about a thing and then they put that thing in there.
Something.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be a jerk, but you kind of just want to, flip the table and you're like, what? No.
Well, I think this is a different case than Inglourious Bastards because the whole film of Inglourious Bastards is a complete parody. So it's absolutely unpretentious in the presentation of like, oh, this was a real event, it really happened. It was like this, and completely unpretentious.
It's on the opposite end of the spectrum of Schindler's List.
Exactly. So it really does not. It's a. We had. I don't know if you guys in the U.S. ever watched this very old series when I was young. It was very famous, called Hello
Yeah,
Hello.
I know it.
It's a
I
British
don't
series.
know it very well, but
So yeah. So I put. It was awesome. It was actually super funny. They actually cared to have fairly good costumes.
Yeah.
Period stuff. It was super fun. The actors are great.
Well, see,
The
but I would
writing
put
was
that.
great. But the thing is, I place it in the same box as Inglourious Basterds. It's fiction. It's a parody. It's making light of some really dark times in this case in France's history.
Oh, okay, but
here I get it.
Hear me out. In America, we have Hogan's Heroes, which
yes,
and
exactly.
That is surprising because I hadn't seen it until I met my wife, and she loves it. And as a World War II person coming in, I was annoyed mainly by the costumes because they have some real ones, but then they just blew out their collars because it was 1967. So I was just like, why are their collars so big? But the events in that show were actually dead on, very, very accurate. And I was really surprised by that, but I can see your point. But so
yes, some of the puns and jokes on that old series about the Russian front, for example, had like a stem of truth. For example, I remember reading later about the Eastern Front, and oh shit, this was not an exaggeration, or it wasn't. Actually, it was a well-made joke because the guy actually knew what he was saying.
That was the threat on Hogan all the time. Russian front, Russian front.
Let me just do a little bit of parallel with the whole thing that you said with the collars and all that. Like, the first time, the biggest time I felt like that was when I saw Patton. Now, Patton is a good movie.
The mid-'70s, I think.
But yes, I like the actor. I like the performance. Yeah. But it always, ever since I was very young, always disturbed me that all tanks were American.
M60s or M47s, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think M47s, but it doesn't matter. There's several types too. So one has to kind of like, for example, you see the Tiger 1 on Saving Private Ryan. It's a fucking T-34 chassis. You can see it. You can absolutely see it.
If you know what you're looking for, yes.
Yeah, but I don't care because the bigger thing.
Yeah, it doesn't take away from it unless you've studied the Tiger tank for years, like I have. And then you look at it and you're like, no.
Sorry, Adam touched a nerve there.
I agree. And when I saw it, I was a World War II interested person. I wasn't a hardcore person, so I saw it in '98 with my friend. Now I didn't know what German tanks looked like terribly well back then, so it was great. And so it's a much better movie than Fury, and Fury had a real tiger. That's a discussion for another day. I guess.
Exactly.
But can you think of anything else that's twisted? It seems to be a modern thing.
No, not in the way that Overlord seems to be. I've only watched the trailer, then I watched your video, and I absolutely am on board with the points you made. It is still, I think, a little bit of a matter of interpretation. So it's our point of view that makes us feel this way.
Well,
but also
it's
the respect we have for the people who live through these events.
And it's hard to ignore the modern political climate part.
Yes, if we're going to go there, which I don't mind,
we don't have to get
I would
into
say
it a lot.
It's fine. It's me, it's fine. Here's the thing, that's all of it.
Yes.
In a nutshell, that's the entire problem here. Like, not a problem, but that's the whole reason why this whole thing is going on right now. Even with games.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it. But you know what I mean.
So yeah, that idea that someone's like, you have to like this or you're awful, is you're not going to get the World War II people on board, I guess, anyway. I guess what they're trying to do is get the average person on board, but the fear with that is that you're normalizing fiction, and this has happened throughout history anyway. I feel like the role of German soldiers in every movie I've ever seen is normalizing somewhat of what my family went through after the war in Milwaukee with the anti-German sentiment. They're all evil, they're all Nazis, they're all trying to kill you. That's still pervasive within World War II stuff, unless it's made in Germany, and sometimes it even is there.
Dude, I'm in Europe. For many years, if you talked about Second World War and Germany, the general opinion was they're all Nazis, or there were all Nazis. That was the popular opinion of Joe Schmo.
Yep. And here it's weird. I mean, that's a whole different thing. So, all right. So do you think we've covered Overlord? Because I don't mind anything else to do with the movie. I just don't care. I mean, by care, I mean I'm fine with it. I don't mind fiction. Zombies, fine. Things, fine. Evil scientists, fine. I mean, none of that was real, but who cares? It's fiction. I don't care.
I think you and I have one problem with missed opportunities, and this was another one. And great production value, right? Great production value. Great story could have been told, even if fantasized, right? Could have been done better. Could have been, I don't know. Could have. So for me, that's the big thing is it will not bring me into the theater to watch it.
My closing thought on it is that it's a dead idea anyway. There was that Dead Snow movie, Nazi zombies in Call of Duty. Like I said in the video, all these old things. It's a little bit beat to death already.
Yeah, agreed. Very much agreed, actually. That's so true. Man, that's so true.
The second topic is the unbanning of swastikas in Germany. I was told about this while talking to our mutual friend Michael, and then I looked it up. I didn't know anything about it, so I'm glad that it happened, but I think that doing it one way, like doing just the video game thing, was a little bit counterproductive. I feel like that if you legislate something that's super specific instead of going back and reviewing your legislation in general, that it might take you longer to fix the actual problem. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, dude, it does. I just think that that's how governments work. It's a huge bureaucracy, and as effective as Germans are, which they are, and we know this, they're probably pussyfooting about it, they know they have to do it, but they can't concede the whole point, so they have to go in stages or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And probably they can even roll it back just out of fear, knee-jerk reaction of some shit.
I think people would view it as a forward thing. But again, we can tiptoe around European politics, but Germany's got bigger problems right now than this. Oh,
not only Germany, but Germany absolutely. And here's the thing. My personal take on this is, there's also anti-displaying of symbols, certain symbols in Portugal. There's the laws also here, not as strict or tight as Germany's laws, but there are. And here's the thing.
Wait. You guys have laws like that?
Not to the extent of the Germans or the French, which are the countries, and maybe Austrians.
I think Michael had mentioned that. I don't mean to talk about him because some people will see this that don't know him. A mutual friend of ours from Bavaria had said that they anywhere in Italy or Austria or anywhere else around him, it's fine. But just not in Germany.
Because they have laws that that's how they incarcerated that revisionist historian Herving or whatever.
About that guy.
So I think he was arrested in Austria for denying the Holocaust. He's one of those Holocaust deniers. And so in Austria, I think he was imprisoned. No, and I'm not 100% sure, but that's, if my memory serves me right, that's what happened. Anyway, my idea about this is it's just stupid. It's just stupid. When you hide something, I mean, it's just popular psychology. If you hide some shit, it will still fester. It will still exist. It'll just be under that stone, just growing without you knowing about it. And I don't like to see swastikas any more than the next guy, but also I don't like to see Soviet flags any more than the next guy.
Yeah, that's a very different conversation.
Listen, I'm going to lump it in because we're talking about totalitarian states killed millions of people, but the difference is one was on the Allied side and the other wasn't.
I think the numbers are roughly twice the murders.
Yeah, so, and let's not even address the big elephant in the room, China, right? Because at the end of the day, China just, wow, the number of victims is beyond, even Stalin, all right?
Yeah, so they don't look like us, so that's different. And I don't mean that
Yeah,
a weird way. It's honestly true. It's too far detached for most people to really think about.
yes, yes. But anyway, so what I think if I want to put a final statement on this is they should get rid of it as fast as possible. Address whatever problems they have with their identity relating to this period of history, and grow up.
Yes. I thought it was bizarre when I learned about it, because I didn't know that, because I'm from the U.S. and we don't really know about stuff like that usually. Not back in the day. Now it's much easier to know.
I mean, what do you gain from hiding fucking history? I'm sorry. What is there to be gained? You tell me. Like, I would like to sit down with one of these SJWs and get, through the, like, sorry, am I being too political here? Okay. Go through the whole reasoning line of thought and just get to the end and say, okay, tell me, please, now that I've listened to your arguments, what is to be gained by hiding something that really happened?
Well, how long ago was...
Oh, it's because it's bad and offensive. Dude, it happened. You can...
I agree, but it was banned...
Scrub it all the way you want. It's never going to go away. It's a stain. It's going to be there forever.
It was banned a super long time ago. I think that's the one difference, is that it was banned probably right after the war. I can look it up, actually.
Yes. It's probably part of the denazification effort.
Yeah, let me look it up real quick. But yeah, I think that's correct.
After the Nuremberg trials, or even during the Nuremberg trials. Sorry, it's very hot here. Shit.
Yeah, so it's been banned for a very, very long time.
Yeah. So I would guess early 50s at the very least, if not even more.
I can't find the exact date. There's just a major article that just says they're banned. So, like, okay. I'm not going to spend too much time looking at that, but I think that the big problem is that it wasn't banned like statues of Confederate generals. It was banned, like you said, denazification. Trying to it'd be like if you got caught doing something really embarrassing by your parents as a kid, and you tried to literally push everything under the bed. It seems like that's like what a bit of the swastika ban thing was. Like, whoop, 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 whoop. It destroyed a crap load of history. As someone that collects stuff, like anything out of Germany is in better shape in general, but if it had a swastika on it, it's destroyed. So it's not worth as much as what we have here. So all the good stuff is in the U.S.
When I had the occasion to visit Nuremberg, as you know, and part of the tour included going on the Zeppelinfeld and on the old Nazi party grounds, building, whatever. It's like, today it's a museum. I didn't have the chance to get in, but it's apparently a very good museum. And to the how the Nazi party rose up the ranks and started getting popular and all those things, and what it did, and the oppression and how that worked. And apparently it's a really good museum, but the entire building is kind of abandoned, apparently. So, but on the Zeppelinfeld, which I actually had the chance to walk on, it's free access. Everyone can just walk in there and actually step on the podium that Hitler used to talk and address to the people and the troops and all that. It's completely wrecked. It's a symbol of shame. It's completely degraded. Nobody gives a shit about that. And it's kind of a weird half-assed attitude. So they don't demolish it at all, just abandon it there. They destroyed the colonnade that was on the sides of the bigger part of the building because they said it was in degraded and an endangering situation, which I understand it was. I'm not sure, but I would if that's the real case. But then they don't really get rid of it. It's just sitting there occupying space. They made a track around it. They made a few fields in the middle of it, but it's really not of any use. So it's a weird, that kind of illustrates the weird, ambiguous relationship that Germans have with this part of their history, which I know you don't like it. We all know you're not Nazis anymore, but please grow up, deal with it, maybe memorialize it in a way that's honorable for the victims, and just get on with it.
It is complicated because they can't celebrate anything like we do. They can't make a museum out of it, even though it kind of deserves to be in different ways. And the guys that like the whole thing that I'm doing this channel for, the guys that were involved in it deserve as much of a museum as anybody here does. But I do understand the political issues with why you can't do that, because you know why.
Yeah, I do. I do, and I don't. Okay, do we need to even preface it? Like, no, we don't support or deny the Holocaust kind of bullshit? Of course not. But nobody's saying Nazis were cool. I'm just saying not everyone was a Nazi. Please grow up.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of like...
No, but that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I do plan to go there at some point, and I've seen what it looks like now, but you're right. It looks like kind of like just like an abandoned building.
Dude, it's just... But the thing is, they actually put like little information points in which you can actually read good information, see how it looked. It's very famous because on the end of every reel after the war, you see the big Nazi party symbol being destroyed, demoed. Top of the building. It's the same building. So
yeah. So
anyway,
I guess my point, having a close friend there, is that I worry that he's not going to get what he wants, which is to have it for scale modeling and for, like, he said you can own stuff. So like uniforms, like I have replica stuff, but you can own it, but you can't buy it and you can't display it. So it's like it's a weird ban on that stuff as well. So, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these, they would have family stuff, but like if you go to the flea market to look for stuff, there's tons of things that would have had that on there, but you got to scratch it off or cut it off. And so I don't, the only thing I've ever bought from Germany was a couple tank parts that don't have anything to do with swastikas on them, because I don't need a bunch of swastika stuff anyway, but I collect stuff from the war, and I wouldn't want it mangled post-war. I would kind of ruin the reason that it's fun to have it and touch it.
It's either real or not, right? I mean, here's the thing. Nobody's glorifying the symbol. It's just, it's either real and in a good state of conservation, like any antique that you would want to buy. If it was like Chinese Qing period, you would want it, whole and complete. So why is this different? You know what I mean? Because the powers that be demonize the symbol, which I understand, because there's a good reason to find the evil in it. But at the same time, we need to accept it. Yes. It happened. It's accepted. We know that how many victims were made. Well, through estimation, but you know what I mean. Let's just grow up and get on with it. Accept it. Integrate it into our reality so that we can grow up, not repeat the same mistake, and keep going.
The weird thing about it is that over here, there's a really, really healthy reenacting community of German reenactors, and there are in Germany as well, but they go out of country to do most of their stuff. Like they go to other countries, but it's strange. I didn't meet any German reenactors here until about 2 years ago, but they're not like us. It is a hobby unto itself where they tend to get into things that's very focused, and they don't tend to be as informed on general history. I don't mean to insult any reenactors that might see this, but the ones that I've met, they tend to be really into their own circles of this is what we call this, and this is how it's grown on its own.
Yeah, so they're in a niche.
The guys that I know in Illinois, they use the real field kitchen to make food, and they drive real vehicles around, and they have all the real stuff, and that should be allowed in Germany, is my point. Because I've gotten to walk through the woods where there were guys camped out in foxholes with real stuff, and it's neat. And that's the part I like. I'm not interested in the fighting each other part, but where they set up and then they talk to people that walk around, living history stuff, that's really cool. So yeah, I just worry that it's not enough, and that it was a little bit in the wrong direction, because it's a you know what I mean? It's like instead of giving rights to everyone, you gave rights to one specific group, instead of just repealing the stupid in the first place. And I think we kind of agree on that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm keeping an eye on the meters. If anybody's too loud, it seems like you might be a little bit louder than me, so I'm trying to make sure we're not horrible.
Let me just pull away the mic a little away.
We're good.
Maybe
So the last one is the Battlefield 5 Backlash. Now that overlaps with the Overlord one, so we don't need to talk about everything again. Now I took a little heat from this video more than any other video.
Yeah, tell me about that, because when I watched it, there were not.
So I just said that people were the wrong genders and the wrong races, and then the idea was, what do you mean? There's no
wrong technologies.
What's that?
Too. Wrong technologies too. The whole thing with the
Yeah,
arm
yeah, yeah.
was
Well,
like,
that
what?
you can't. There's no apology for that one. But so what I'm talking about is I get there was women there, and I'm like, well, yes. What I'm referring to is frontline troops only, combat units. You know, let's say the British armored unit or whatever. If it's resistance, of course, SOE fine, French resistance fine, OSS fine,
Partisans,
sure,
and some
anything.
Soviet.
Yes, and now I looked up the Soviet women.
There
weren't as
few,
many as
not
people
many.
like to make you think there were.
No, there were, however, quite a lot of snipers.
I read about that.
Specialized personnel. Not
No, I read about that, and that's actually a little overblown as well. It's overblown because there was a famous female sniper.
Several,
Yeah,
but
so
you're talking about Ludmila Pavlichenko.
yeah, so I maybe I can do a video on her, post some numbers later. But yeah, it was like in the grand.
If you do include the Night Witches, it's also interesting.
Night Witches?
Yes, the bomber.
Oh yes.
The bomber.
So, but the
bombers.
Just to clarify, there were transportation pilots and all this. But what I did is, luckily, there's a really good resource online that lists like all female World War II people, you know, what they did in each country, and 95% were auxiliary or support staff, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like Eisenhower's driver was a girl. That's fine. Tons of women there. All we're talking about was combat units. That's it.
Yes. You did have, let me give you an example. You did have one woman commanding a tank in the Soviet army, one that I know of, maybe more. So it's not like real numbers. That's for sure. That's where you're trying to get at.
It's the outlier. If you want to the exception, fine. But we don't. When I watch or read or do whatever, it's almost never a factor on the majority of the history of the war. It's an outlying part of the war, and that's fine.
I want to make one thing clear before we keep going, which is this is not about us trying to be, or at least I don't feel it is, like, oh, it couldn't be because women couldn't do it. No. It's not that. Back then, there's the historical context.
I just don't want to look at historical stuff that's based on, well, this happened this one time, so let's make it a huge part of what we're doing. I'm like, well, that's a little silly. The really silly Enemy at the Gates movie, you know, Rachel Weisz is cool, but you know that they did they didn't make her just like his partner. She was just in the town, and it kind of made sense the way they handled her. Like she wasn't the exact same thing as him. There were female soldiers shown in that. That was, I guess I'm rambling. That was the right way to do it. They had women in Stalingrad that made sense. Even though I don't like that.
And there were female
because you would
there,
if you're surrounded for the most part, apart from the supplies, that would make sense. And
same with Leningrad, probably.
Yeah. So anyway, these are not things I'm an expert on, but that's a Hollywood movie. But I thought they handled it because he had partners that were both genders, Vasily Zaitsev in that movie, and it wasn't offensive to anyone at all. It was like, whatever, there's girls there.
Yeah, fine.
And if you know anything about Russia, it makes more sense with Russia. Also, like you said, no cybernetic arms, which makes sense. So that part, we'll deal with.
That was, for me, that was like.
If you.
And I did watch the entire thing, which is awesome. It's very beautiful. Lovely work on the 3D department, for sure. It's a complete. But it's complete crap in terms of this historicity.
We were analyzing some of the vehicle models on the Panzer research page.
No, but I was talking about the cinematography.
No, it's beautiful. It's too fast-paced for me anyway. Maybe I'm getting old. But that trailer's like, it's like being on cocaine. You're just like, that's fine. That's just me showing my age.
Yeah, it is a bit too much. Agreed, yes.
But
it's worth a watch is what I'm saying.
I had mixed feelings on it when I first saw it because I was like, well, if it's so different, is it so different that it doesn't annoy me? Apparently not. Because I'm just...
It does
I'm just telling you how I feel. When I first saw it, I was like, is this different enough that I can be okay with it? I'm like, no. And what I said in the video on that one is that Call of Duty World War II didn't annoy me at all for that reason. Like you could be black in multiplayer. I don't care. That's fine. Because what if the guy playing is black and he wants to represent himself? I have no problem with that whatsoever. That's fine. Because you're not changing like the narrative of the war. You're just saying it's all imaginary in those scenarios. You're in a tiny little. It's like playing paintball. You're in a tiny map with some stuff. Like, I don't care. That's fine.
Here's the thing. I've been thinking about this one because when they start doing what they did with Overlord, which is blurring the lines between reality and fiction, I am kind of the school of just go all the way, man, and do what they did, for example, in Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which you referenced to, of course, and. There, I mean, it's clear that it's not 100% accurate, and nobody cares because it's
super.
That's how it is.
Well, but then again, they chose the line of. It's an easy line to choose, like Man in the High Castle. What if this had happened?
Exactly. I mean, well, the Man in the High Castle is a little bit more serious.
But their idea is, well, they've got a whole fantasy element too, like the newsreel thing and the actual Man in the High Castle. That didn't make that much sense to me.
And back then, with this, let me just elaborate a little bit more on the whole Return to Castle Wolfenstein thing. Which back then, I remember the impact it had on me. That it wasn't as much as like, oh, this is a different universe kind of thing. It's that kind of old, because there's this mystery about Nazi technology that isn't. It's super overblown, as we all know.
Very overblown.
So there's like the Nazi bell and all that bullshit. And the thing is. But still, it's a nice fiction to grab onto and latch other things that are fun, like zombies and cyborgs. Yeah. In that universe, it makes sense. It's cool, But then again, everyone is, knows what's going on, knows what's happening, and so everyone's fine with it. But when you're starting to. Yeah, this is how it was, and then cybernetic arms and whatever you want to. I don't know. It's just weirded me out. The whole thing with the girl just so out of place that I can't even classify it. If you were to do some cyberpunk game with that character, no context whatsoever of the Second World War, it would have been perfect. Yeah. That character is a good character in that world. Take that to another fantasy world or real world, just sucks. Anyway, that's kind of... Yeah.
All right, so we have now rearranged ourselves. All that empty space was meant for, websites and videos and stuff that we didn't show, so that might seem a little strange, but hey, it's our first one. We'll get used to it.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
All right. I wanted to start, there's a couple of different topics that made me want to start doing podcast stuff, or maybe I just was trying to think of topics to do podcast stuff. And a lot of this I'll do later. But so what I thought about is the reason that I got into the war, and I tell everybody this, is that my grandfather that I never met was in it. I've actually heard that story a lot from people. They were a myth to them. Like, he didn't die in it, but he died in 1977 and I was born in 1979. So it was mythical. Oh, your grandpa that was in the war. What war? That's what got to me. But then when I learned about it, I learned that I am a good chunk English, I'm a good chunk German, and that's ethnicity. And then nationality, I'm American. World War II in Europe is my war. It's a civil war. It's half my family versus the other half of my family, except we had moved away, and then we went back and fought on the side of the British, although... Even into World War I, my grandmother's family was in the German army. So it was a very recent breakaway. So it just blew my mind. It's like I'm at war with myself. So when I watch stuff, I can relate to everybody. Now, the longer I've been doing this, the less I relate to certain parts of it. And I think that'll be a topic for a whole nother day, which is that I find that certain countries are more accepting to the idea that you can relate to them ethnically. Like, I am half you. No, you're not. I'm like, okay, that's not important. But anyway, from my perspective, the war, it's so easy for me to understand because my family's from all of the places that were the main parts, not Japan and Russia, but all the other ones. So, what I wanted to do was talk about bias and then impression on people from countries that aren't the U.S. because the U.S., of course, has a major
Blair, yeah.
But the way that we look at it as a culture, not me, is very well known. A lot of people hate it. We're very like, "Urgh." So, and then that fell into this idea, which was that I have a couple friends, you being the main one, that are from a neutral country, which is Portugal. And I was curious, so we'll do two things here, but I'm curious how it, not only what Portugal did, but how do you feel? You don't need to feel special or related to the war, but how does it look to someone who's not from one of the countries? So that's kind of what started the idea.
That's interesting. Yes, that's very interesting. So I think what I can bring up here is first and foremost perception. So like, stories that my grandfather told me, people I knew, like family and friends across life that, their impressions about this period of time. And there are many, by the way, lots of myths. Some probably propagated by the government itself, others just popularized by, just socially, the things just grow. And then a little bit of what I read, because there's a lot to be said, but if we don't want to go for the cliche thing, which is the spying network.
Well, I don't know a lot about it. I mean, you don't have to get in depth into it, but is
Yes, I can. So all right, so let's first get so the official way of seeing how back then we were a dictatorship.
I didn't
right?
see. I don't know that. I know that Spain. So
Yeah.
Okay. What was Portugal doing during the Spanish Civil War? Were you already a dictatorship?
We were helping Franco.
Okay.
So we were already a
Fascist-friendly dictatorship.
Yes, fascist-friendly dictatorship ruled by a one-man show, Mr. Antonio Oliveira Salazar, who was a very famous economist and teacher at a big university in Portugal, and he was very conservative, and he kind of straightened up the finances of the country. Now, please understand, a gazillion things can be said about how he did it, what he did, and this is not up for discussion right here. Let's talk about the war, because I think I don't have enough knowledge to actually go in depth into the finances, and I know a little bit here, a little bit there. Popular stories, a lot of them I can share with you guys. It's all good. Now, so what we were doing in the Spanish Civil War, which was from, if my memory doesn't fail me, 36 to 39, we were helping Franco with a lot of things. So shipments, lots of.
If I can go back real quick, now Franco was in Africa, if memory serves.
Yeah, I started out. I think he started off in Morocco, and
so the story goes. My apologies for not doing a load of research here, but it's the Germans helped him fly back his army. So
I don't know too much about that, but I think we helped him ship.
Okay.
Like some flew, some went by boat, and we probably helped them a little bit. And this is what we did for them for a long time. So like we hauled foods, we hauled weaponry, probably people, all of that. We helped him. We granted him access through Portugal so that he could get supplies, and we also helped him with men. So little known fact.
Okay, that's a big deal, though.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I think the numbers are between 8,000 and 12,000 people fought from all three branches of the armed forces, fought with Franco in a division or detachment, whatever you want to call it, called WWII. I think there were also volunteers. By the way, these were all volunteers.
Well, we had volunteers on the other side, so that was pretty common at the time.
But I think we also had a few on the other side. So people who were already revolutionary here in Portugal probably also joined the other side. And what was the name of the brigade? I keep forgetting. The other side, the Republican brigades, they had names. But anyway, we had also a few people on the other side, but the majority of Portuguese were fighting on Franco's side. So that's how basically we helped Franco win the war in Spain. And I think this mostly happened, if you want to like a quick glance at it, I think this mostly happened because Salazar identified himself more with Franco because he really was an anti-communist. He really did not like communism, and that's one of the reasons why he joined Franco. He was a Catholic, he was a religious man. He was very pragmatic, so on and so forth. And that's probably one of the reasons why he joined Franco's side instead of joining the Republican side. He also had a very bad vision of a republic, basically, because he basically was asked to help the military government that had substituted the First Republic. So 1910, we have the revolution in which the king is killed, and we have the Republic, and then the Republic's super unstable. There's a lot of presidents just come in and go. And after a while, I think in 26, again,
that's all right.
I'm sorry if I fail some dates. I think it's in 26 that the military take over the government, and they rule Portugal from then on. And they invite, at a certain point, these ministers to finally come in and start straightening up the economy, social, education, all that. So that's the basic context.
Now, do you have any idea how you don't need to, but how the supporting Franco was viewed by any people that were around that you may have known, like, or whether or not that was a well-supported thing?
You see, my family hails from the countryside near the border, and
you don't have to know. I'm just that's a curious thing.
About that, not really. I don't think I was never really told one way or the other.
It'd be something worth looking into because it'd be similar to Sudeten Germans or Austrians. A lot of them were very pro-German at the moment, but this stuff with Spain and Portugal would have been prior to that, so there wasn't a lot of precedent set for, we'll become part of this. And it didn't seem like Franco had any territorial expansion ideas. So,
he towards Portugal, he kind of had it at one time. Salazar was actually, I think, afraid of that. This is just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think because Salazar was very zealous of like Portuguese independence because we're smaller than Spain. Like Franco at a point was really strong. And I think what really kept him from invading us, if there ever was this was that fact that he helped him, and he kind of felt, we have a friend.
Okay.
We don't need to go in and do whatever. And also Spain was a wreck.
Yeah, that was pretty rough. Okay, so then where do we go from there? So you guys fought sort of the same as a lot of countries. People fought for and against, probably, so not officially allied with or anything of the sort. Moved to, I suppose, 39 or somewhere around there, whatever the next bit you have is. So
so from there, Salazar aligns himself mostly with the Allies.
For pragmatic reasons? Is that everything to do with British control?
Yeah. Political and pragmatic.
Well, because most of Portugal is a coast.
Yes, exactly. So, and there's the Azores, which is the equivalent to almost like a carrier in the middle of the Atlantic.
And that's yours or Portuguese?
Yeah, the Azores, it's still us. Yes, it's we have like 2 island archipelagos. One's the Madeira and the other is Azores, and those 2 Azores, which still has a U.S. base on it,
like you do,
from that time to this day.
We do that. We put bases lots of places.
Oh, it's fine. I don't have a bad opinion about it. I'm sure we're going to get enough hate.
Well, if you bring in the right people, they'd have a real big problem with
it. Yeah, and so I think what he mostly tried was keep the the oldest alliance in the world is between Portugal and England. It's really old. It's it's 700 years old or some stuff like that.
That's a while.
It's really old, and it's, by the way, ongoing to this day. Never broken. Almost broken once, but never actually broken. So he didn't want to break that. We were weak. We were very weak at that point in time. No possible warring intentions could ever come out of Portugal at that point. We're super weak. Our army's a mess. Everything's a mess. So our navy's a mess. Everything was just bad. So I think what he wanted to do is how can we keep our possessions around the world? Remember, we are a colonial power. We had like, I don't know how many colonies, many colonies from the East Indies or Indonesia and all those islands like East Timor and stuff, all the way to India, Africa, and so on. So
East Timor, some real fun stuff happened there later, but different.
Well,
that's for a different channel.
That's, exactly. So, so I think what he was trying to do is like, how can we keep this? Be careful with our allies. First and foremost, remember, England is king of the seas.
That was my point, is that you have the main British fleet, and they were also in there's a lot of stuff in the Mediterranean at the time of the start of the war. You would have had, the French would have been around there. You would have had the Italian Navy. You would have had the British. I don't know how many ships they had in the beginning, but maybe it would have been more up for debate at that point, like in 1939, as to like whether you decided that they would keep control. But I don't think they ever really, apart from the U-boats sinking merchant stuff, I don't think that militarily speaking, like surface ships, they were ever out of control of things.
No, I don't think so. And even with the wolf packs, I kind of have this idea that the British kind of ruled the Atlantic nonetheless.
Yes, that's why I said the merchant ships. Because if you think about when Bismarck went out, and she destroyed Hood, but immediately it was swarmed, mostly by smaller vessels, but still it was swarmed. That's the point. They chased her down. Mm-hmm. She shouldn't have ran like she did, or she should. There's a lot of opinions about how that should have gone, but not alone anyway. But yes, in general, the point is, British controlled primarily all of the seagoing stuff, and you guys are seafaring people, I would assume. So.
Mm-hmm. No, we were, but our navy was, like I said, very weak, very bad. So it doesn't even count for any of that. It was a non-issue. We could never antagonize England. Realistically
not
speaking.
Since
so every
the 1600s,
ship,
probably. It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, ever since the well, let's not get into that because it's going to take. But anyway, so that was I think we need to understand one thing. Salazar was extremely patriotic or nationalistic. It was the kind of authoritarianism that he was running in this country. It was a very patriotic one. So I think most of all, in the forefront of his mind was how to keep this whole deal intact, how to keep what he got intact the same way, that the day he got it, so that he could pass it on intact still in terms of the whole possessions.
So literally holding the fort, making sure that,
Exactly. Because he was brought in at first like, okay, can we straighten this stuff up? Because this is a mess. And he was kind of considered a genius in economics and stuff. And, anyway. So here's what he did. He always had really strong ties with England, later with the US, which I have this idea that he really did not particularly like. I don't know for what reason. I don't know much in depth about it. But if you guys were rolling with the British, that's fine, kind of deal. And later he actually proceeds to give Base das Lajes, which is that base I talked to you about, through the U.S. military. And
that's interesting, though, because we didn't have the reputation then that we do now. There was pre-industrial complex, whatever people don't like about us. Team America, World Police is all before that stuff. So.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it was slow. Like, I think it was like, okay, you can build like a small airfield, bring 3 planes there. Then it was like, okay, now you can build the barracks. And,
where are these places?
So the base is in the Azores.
So does this have anything to do with the Mid-Atlantic Gap?
Yeah, like in
Yeah,
the Mid
so
Atlantic, like there.
I'll have to look into how much that, if that's, yeah,
So that's like a hopping
sure.
position. If you think about it, if you have like fuel there, you can hop your planes very easily to Europe.
Or more importantly, you could have long range aircraft searching for U-boats. Yeah.
For example, so like a base of operations. So I think that was basically it for that. Now, at the same time, we're also doing commercial stuff and supplies with Germany and
Now, I don't think that wasn't that
powers.
abnormal in my opinion, at least in the beginning of the war.
It was frowned upon, but Salazar was very hush hush. Like he was like, we do this because this is what serves us, our interest the best. And it turns out he was right. Turns out he was right in terms of, as a country, we were able to completely, dodge bullets and still actually make money out of the war.
Oh, you're one of those countries, huh? So are we.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. And in the end, and by the way, this is a very well-known myth in Portugal. It used to be said. My grandfather always told me, like, oh, the trains used to leave Portugal, saying, there were leftovers from Portugal on the train cars, when they were just sending supplies or stuff to Germany or to the Axis powers via Spain, by the way, via northern Spain, because Franco was also doing his pussyfooting around Hitler at the same time. I have this thing in which I kind of think Franco, and not only me, by the way, historians also think Salazar and Franco were working in tandem in a way that kept both our asses out of the war, basically, which ended up by happening.
Yeah, I've always thought it was impressive that Franco. Impressive might be the wrong word, but you know what I mean. It's interesting that he stayed out because
he stayed out, and here's why. So there's one notable exception though, which is Barbarossa, as you know, right? Blue Division,
I'm not familiar with it. No,
Blue Division, really. The Spanish Division.
Didn't know. I don't know everything, man.
So okay, so
we're here to learn.
Okay, so, yes, but you're very informed. But just why
you know where my specialties lie.
So I don't remember the exact numbers. Can you pull that up? Search for Blue Division. It had, I think, I don't know how many Spanish, but it had. Get a load of this. It had 1,000 Portuguese.
Oh, okay, so part of it was, I see. All right, so
yeah. So everyone thinks we never fought in the Second World War, and they're wrong. We did, not officially though. Salazar did not support these people.
These 1,000 men of the Portuguese Legion.
Yes.
Yeah.
They sometimes are called the Green Legion within the Blue Legion.
Interesting.
The Blue Division, but it's kind of. Of course, then later they were recalled.
Okay.
By Franco, and the Portuguese were also recalled, of which apparently, according to the very little I know and was able to find, 50 of them actually were then assigned to SS because they wanted to keep fighting. They did not want to return. So they wanted to keep fighting. These were, by the way, these 1,000 men from the Blue Division were from this previous division, the WWII, that had fought in the Spanish Civil War. So they were ongoing.
They're ideologically predisposed to supporting the Germans.
Yeah.
I see.
So I think they were mostly anti-communist. And some of them were what they call the anti- or nationalistic syndicalistic. There was a mix between movements back then here in Portugal that was kind of weird.
That's understandable. Anyway. There's a lot going on then, like there is now. Really high tempers about lots of this. Yeah,
convoluted stuff. Yeah. So I don't really know much about that. I know that about 50 men then stayed behind, probably dividing themselves between other divisions in the SS. Maybe Charlemagne, maybe other divisions. I don't really know. Apparently, there might have been actual Portuguese fighting at the Battle of Berlin at the end of the war.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
That much I don't know. I've read in a few forums references to books including that talk about this. But you know how it is with sources. If there's not more than one about the same subject, it becomes real sketchy. So I'm going to take this with
agreed.
A lot of salt. So, So what I'm trying to say is this is surprising for a lot of people that think that, oh no, we're fully neutral. Well, yes and no. Officially, we are neutral. Politically, is this in terms of policy? Yeah, politically.
Yes.
Politically, yes. We're correct. Yes. Politically, we're aligned with the yes. Allies. Yet we're doing some underhanded shit with.
Wow. Okay, but how much of Portuguese volunteers is any different than like the American volunteers fighting for the other side and the Spanish? It could just be people. It didn't seem like it was a policy that this guy of yours sent people.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Like Salazar did not authorize.
So if some Portuguese are doing things with the Axis, that's very different than if you guys were secretly doing anything. I don't know what kind of.
Yeah, officially.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that officially they were actually forbidden to do it. So they're really Salazar did not want them to go.
Do you have natural resource exports of any kind? I know you're a rather small country.
Yes. So we had like I think it was tungsten and there was used for ammunition. Once again, one of those stories I heard from my
it's well known in Panzer circles that tungsten was always not around, and that certain designs of certain tanks were changed due to that fact. Like the Tiger H2 was supposed to have a 75 millimeter barrel that could compete with the 88 if it had tungsten rounds, but they didn't have enough, so it didn't make sense to do it. They're like, well, screw it, we'll just use the standard 88s.
So apparently we were the ones, or one of the suppliers of tungsten. And not only, also food, because I don't know if you know this, we were big into, tinned food.
Oh, okay.
Canned food,
non-perishable stuff, yeah.
And, yes, exactly, like tuna and stuff like that. Probably I'm going to risk clothing or fabric material.
Sure.
Which we probably had a few industries that were. And what is the big myth around here is that all of this was sent to Hitler for free in order to keep us out of the war. This was probably something propagated by the government itself in a way to appease the populace and also the spies that were in Portugal, because all the agencies were in Portugal, in Lisbon specifically, trying to pass misinformation to each other. Even some of the most famous, like that Spanish dude that fooled the Abwehr, and worked with the British OSS, I think.
OSS is us.
OSS or OES?
SOE is their, yeah.
SOE, that's it. Sorry. So, this was the environment in Lisbon. So this was kind of propagated, but it's a lie. Basically, Hitler paid every dime. Salazar was really nasty with accounting because, he was the finance minister. Yeah. So, like, you want food, you want stuff, you pay for it. And so apparently, I read this book by a Portuguese historian, a very good one. By the way, he had sources on the book that come from our archives. And it had like ledgers and stuff of us receiving truckloads of gold and other the currency from through the Pyrenees in northern Spain all the way up to the Portuguese territories, and then probably being stored in
truckloads of gold is never a good sign in that time.
Yeah. So this was happening.
That could be
very colorful language.
That could be privatized industry as well, but I honestly don't think that
it was a sort of corporativist regime. So there were this was a weird regime. People call it was like fascism. I don't feel it wasn't revolutionary first and foremost, not at all. I don't see it like it. There were elements of authoritarianism for sure. Like do not be mistaken. I mean, there was censorship. There was persecution. There was a police specialized, like Gestapo type police, not as ruthless but pretty bad.
Yeah.
So it was a dictatorship. Let's not confuse things. But fascism?
Not exactly. Well, even the German form of fascism, most people would say, isn't really fascism or socialism. not in the strictest terms, not only by not by the Italian definition, but not even by like modern definition.
Yes.
It was sort of.
I think the cop out for a lot of historians, Adam, is that they call it different things.
Yes.
They say it is the totalitarian regime, and then they say it, of socialistic in the case of the Soviet Union in times of Stalin. Or they say, it was the Nazi regime or the fascist regime, or in the case of Portugal, they call it the Salazarismo, which was Salazar, bears the name of Salazar, which is kind of a fascismo with Salazar, or Franquismo with Franco. And they call it different things so they can distinguish between different
some people do that with Stalin too. If you talk Stalinist Russia versus communist or Soviet Russia, it's all kind of the same thing.
Exactly. So, it is what it is. I mean, in this regard, I do know from people there were a lot of persecution. There were some really bad times. There were lots of misery in Portugal back then. Lots of illiteracy, which he actually helped combat. Not to the numbers you see sometimes displayed online. They're exaggerated. But he did do something for basic literacy, So he did do that. But he did not do it to the, like higher levels of education at all. But yeah, so what was happening is he was there's this very famous parable or story about him. I think my grandfather or someone old told me this back then. And it was like that when he was selling tungsten to Germany, he got like this contact from Churchill or the Allies, let's say, because it's not specified. And remember, it's a myth. It's kind of a myth. It's kind of a story. Gets told. I don't know how truthful this is, so feel free to just
disregard it.
Say yes, but this will tell you perception. Which is
it's kind of what we're trying to get to anyway, which is
So both Franco and Salazar were known for being cunning, like foxes, like real cunning. Astute people, and what ends up by happening is, so the Allies contact Salazar and say, hey, what the hell, man? You're selling them tungsten. They're going to make ammunition that will kill Allied troops. And apparently Salazar, who was very big on killing communists in a way because he didn't like them, just told them that, be quiet because, the same tungsten I'm selling them is going to kill many more communists in Russia. So his vision was of the post-war was, he had this vision of what would be the post-war.
Interesting. Now that could be revisionist, like you said. Who knows if it's true?
But it was. Remember, I was told this. Like I'm 41. I was told this when I was very young.
Okay.
When I started showing interest in history, so.
No, that's interesting. That's the main thing I want to know is how it's perceived, how it kind of feels to be.
There was a little contact. We were very isolated from the war. I remember my grandfather told me. So we lived relatively close to the border, and my grandfather remembers an airplane crashing nearby, and then lots of trucks from the army, lots of personnel going and cleaning the area up,
scrubbing it, so to speak, Area 51 style.
Kind of. Yeah, almost. Probably not as exaggerated, but at least cleaning the field.
I can just imagine that's what it would look. Military trucks drive out. You don't know what they're doing, and
especially for a population. Remember, this is the countryside. Population who is not very, knowledgeable. They're not. I mean, my granddad was actually he had like fourth grade, maybe high school at the most, and he had done 5 years in the army, so he knew what the army stuff looked like. He was not ignorant of that. But he was also very young when this happened. So that
kind of continued for the majority of the war. Make a little money. A couple of people volunteered, but nothing huge.
Lots of spying networks and all of that was going on in Lisbon. And I think most of the most important parts of what concerns Portuguese history in the Second World War is exactly that story of all of that dynamic between the Abwehr and
Yeah, and
SOE and the OSS and
I imagine it a lot like a cosmopolitan city from a James Bond movie in the 60s. You've got kind of a happening city.
I shit you not. He wrote it in Lisbon. Casino Royale is based. Casino Royale. He was an officer assigned to Lisbon.
I knew he was I didn't know he was in Lisbon though. Okay, that makes sense. But that's so I'm kind of right there that it's a happening city that's not under wartime conditions, but all of the powers are pushing spies and things in the area. It's really interesting.
They're chess pieces. Yes, the Casino Royale is actually written upon an actual casino that still exists called Casino Estoril, which he probably went there to play and do his, spy shit. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that environment of the 007 kind of breeds a little bit of that.
Okay, so I happen to know a bit about U-boats. So you guys are on the coast so they would go, especially after France was captured and their ports were built there, they would go down to North Africa occasionally or off the west coast of Africa to knock out ships. Do you know of anything of that sort? Like, was that a danger to Portuguese shipping or anything? I'm curious if they dealt with that because you're right there.
Probably they avoided us.
Because that's, I guess, if you had the national flag, which most do, they'd see it, and I suppose they would figure out.
No, I'm not saying they didn't sunk any of our ships, kind of like, I wouldn't say by accident, but by mistake.
Just
but I would.
What do you call it? Collateral damage. There you go. Like they were, it was there. Exactly. We didn't see it. Whatever. Like I heard they.
I'm inexperienced, and I just shot a fucking torpedo because that's what we do.
Yeah. In a book I read about U-505, they torpedoed like a yacht off the coast of the Caribbean. Like this, that was owned by I think it was like a political figure or something of that area. So, you shoot what you see, because a lot of times they would go out for a long time and the crew would get restless. I mean, I'm not saying they would just kill people to get kills, but that's what you're doing. But yeah, you're right around where they would go hunting towards.
And what's the name of that operation that SOE put in place, where they dumped a body?
Oh, that's Operation Mincemeat.
Yes, exactly. So they, I think, for a while actually thought of doing it in the Portuguese coast, but because we had this very weird policy about, I don't know if you know this, in the Algarve, which is the southern portion of Portugal, you can actually go there, and there's a cemetery that has at least, I think, 4 German graves of aviators that fell in the water nearby, and they still have the typical German graves of that type with, I think, with the Iron Cross or Balkreuz or something like that. It's very typical. It's completely different from what we have, because Portugal's traditional Catholics. So it's all very, and very, and it's there. I think they're still there. So, and they were put there right then and there. So when they died, they were just buried there. So I'm guessing official relationships with Germany were always good and stable, so that this could happen quickly and without any fuss.
Makes sense.
But, on the other hand, we're helping the Allies, and also for Operation Mincemeat, they preferred to handle it to Franco, probably because they thought Franco had a more direct channel to Hitler. I don't remember Salazar ever meeting Hitler, but Franco did. I
mean, they were friendly. The Germans helped out quite a bit to help him win. So,
although one of the last things Hitler ever said about Franco was that he would rather have all of his teeth pulled than have another meeting with him. So that went well.
Interesting. Well, he didn't help him. Maybe he was just mad that he hadn't gotten.
He just you would just sit there and make unreasonable demands and frustrate Hitler constantly.
Interesting. So, All right, so I mean that's
kind of it. It's not that much. We can then do like I I don't have much information on the whole spy network thing because I've never just studied that. But I would like, and probably will read. I think there's a really good book. I think it's Anthony Beevor's book about Lisbon in the war regarding the whole spy network thing. I might read it.
Okay.
And then can have a focused discussion
absolutely.
if you want. Still find it interesting.
If then we can just go to what is your then just the Carlos, you as a person, like, do you think it changes your views on what you're interested in, or with what intensity you're interested in it, being from where you are? Because I guess why I'm trying to dig into this is because Americans are so gung-ho about, to their own error at times, where they take credit for, I'm not trying to insult this, but there are those of us that take credit for everything. There are people in England that take credit for everything. So it just fascinates, because it's for you, it's the war next door, not the war of your culture.
Yes.
So that's a very different thing.
Yes, we have. Yes,
And I don't really have a concise point to bring that to. I'm just curious if maybe you wouldn't even be conscious of any difference than we would have. But I'm just curious what your take on is being. You're a pretty big World War II guy.
Yes. For me, personally speaking, I'm a complete hobbyist lover of history.
So you have a wider range than me. I'm pretty limited.
Yes. Second World War is something I get interested because you can pick three major events in human history, and that's one. Like the plagues, Genghis Khan, and this shit. It's humongous. The scale, the scope, and I remember being very young and impressed by the scope. Like, to think that almost everywhere in the territory that today is the European Union and Russia, or at least that Ukraine area, and up almost into Moscow, you couldn't go anywhere there wasn't conflict, either outright or army personnel,
occupations, or stuff like
occupations. So it's just the sheer dimension of it just gives me awe.
Like it does with everybody. I assume everybody that gets into it in the way that I do. It's like you said, most important event that I can fathom, and was everywhere, and there's all these different facets to it. So,
and there's like this, 70 years, and 73 years now. We're not even close to being over the effects of that single event. I mean, not even close. And personally speaking, I have another period of history which I can relate to kind of sometimes do opposing
juxtaposition
points. Yes. So, which is the Roman history, which is my favorite period of history. From Republic to the end of the Byzantine Empire, I really love that entire period of time. And it's vast because it goes from 750 BC to 1453 when Constantinople falls to the Turks. And it's different. It goes at very slow pace. Second World War is unbelievable in its space. The way I see it is just, it's almost breakneck speed in a lot of things. Now, I know that, people have this idea of being the mechanized war, which it was to an extent, but, how many millions of horses were used, how many miles were done on foot. I mean, it's not as fast, but in the grand scope of things, it's incredibly fast and destructive.
Yeah, the time scale of even 39 to 45, or if you take the Chinese and Japanese stuff, 33 roughly. And the technology advance is a big deal. What I think about it a lot is I have a very pragmatic view of the war, and I think the armored thrusts were normally in the beginnings of things. The first couple things they try to do, we'll go here, we'll go here, we'll go here. Then in the end, when the lines get developed, it's primarily artillery, which may have been brought up horse-drawn, and infantry. That's what you're going to hold the line with. Yeah, you're going to have panzers and you're going to have mobile artillery, but a lot of that
But then you have to have people.
Yeah,
in the
a lot of
ground,
that
boots.
early Eastern Front stuff is horse-drawn artillery. I've read books about it, and it's strange. Even Fall of France, I've read a book about the artillery there too. So, all right, so
Yeah.
you know, I don't think you look at it much differently than me, but maybe that's kind of what I was just trying to figure out is it any different for people who were close by? You know, you're not German, you're not British, but you were
No,
there.
because we kind of were, but we kind of were insulated.
Well, you're right on the coast. You're on the very western edge of Europe, so.
Yeah, but back then they did a really good job of, like, you can still, like, let me just give you this example. You can still look to photos of events at the embassy with Portuguese dignitaries that attended the German embassy, and you see like full-on Nazi everything, like Nazi regalia, full-on like flags, brown shirts, armbands, everything. They're in Portuguese soil, just either it's a choir singing, and there's this event with the ambassador, and it's kind of uncanny, like, because it seems kind of unreal because that's far away in our minds. We were so insulated from it. You know, nobody remembers the war.
Except for the couple hundred guys that went to Russia, and they probably didn't come back. They probably ended up in a gulag somewhere.
I think so. I think actually a few did. But the thing is, the way we remember it is we were all very hungry, and Salazar was sending shit.
So profiting off of the breadbasket of your own country.
Kind of the mythos is he was not giving us proper food, education, clothing, but he also, so there's the duality here. As you know, every big dictator has fans and detractors. He's no different. So the very old people usually say, oh, but he kept us, off the war and blah, 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 which is a mistaken assumption. We could never, there's no way we could go against our allies. And the other, more modern view is, oh, but he made us miserable and so on and so forth. But in fact, I actually also think that's wrong because before Salazar, it was even worse.
Yep, and
so there's something to be said.
Well, that time was all about catching up to, for a lot of countries, catching up technologically or health or reading, like you said. You're early in the 20th century if we're talking 1930, and a lot of countries hadn't had their time to, let's call it, modernize. So whoever, did you get a guy that tried to lift you up into a modern society, or did you get somebody who didn't really give a shit? And if you look in Eastern Europe, lots of weird stuff was happening there at the same time that they were. I'm talking like Bulgaria and Romania. It could have gone a number of different ways, right? Depending on who took power. I'm not talking Soviet versus German influence, but like what particular guy took power there. Now in that region, the Germans would invade if they had to. They'd be like, well, we don't like that guy, so we're gonna drive in.
Absolutely. I'm gonna actually say that maybe like Romania and a few other allies, if they didn't, they would be invaded. Absolutely, they would.
I mean, that's kind of how that went. I mean, Yugoslavia went through a couple of different, but let's not call it back and forth, but. The Germans would try to influence it there, and then the people would, if there's a strong communist presence, they'd be like, nope, and then they're like, well, yeah, and they drive right back in, and then you have to deal with partisans the rest of the war, but that's because it was in the way. It was in between them and Lebensraum. You weren't. So it's interesting. So Portugal, purely by where it is, I think, because Franco created a relatively strong country that was in between you and Europe. That's...
In a way,
it would, because he was like, nah, I'm not interested in this. What if he had been? What if Franco had said, yeah, let's do this? And they could have attacked France from two sides. They could.
And they would be lost. There's no way. And I think Hitler actually wanted that. But as soon as he realized that Mr. Franco would just not cooperate, he would do crazy demands on natural resources because his country was in shambles.
Okay.
And he knew that. I think Franco had this idea, and probably right, that if he moved his army away from the country, mobilized troops away from,
he'd lose power.
He would lose power. Yeah, he would lose just control of the situation. So he was aware of that, I think. And if let's just take a second, I don't know if we're
getting there,
time here,
but we can say what we want.
Okay. All right. So just quickly then. If we look at the geographic strategic map
Yes.
of Europe, like it would not be easy to pull off an invasion of Portugal without the help of Spain, if at all possible. Though we're small, our geography isn't that easy to navigate, and just the resources of just dragging troops by water, by sea, passing Gibraltar, which was the lid on the Mediterranean, controlled by the British. And let's not forget that. And in Morocco too. And basically to invade a small country with very little resources to be even worth it.
What I'm surprised by is that if you were an allied country, I wonder if they ever thought about not invading mainland Europe, but landing in Portugal. But the problem is Spain, right? Spain's not in the war, so you can't go through there. But you guys are right there. It would have been a lot easier than landing in Normandy, but then you have to go through Spain. So.
Oh no, but the Allies.
No, but I mean, if
they were having a sweet deal with us, so they just thought, yeah.
No, I just mean if it had gone different ways, is what I'm saying.
I think, let me just make one final statement. Like, I think the story of the Second World War in this regard of these big politicians is a story of people who are absolutely duplicitous and human in the way they're dealing with the war. So Franco, he's always seen as this evil guy that was on the side of Hitler. Yes, but no. At the same time. Same with Salazar. Same even with Mussolini. I think Mussolini at first was kind of like, who is this guy, Hitler?
Yep.
It's kind of a bit of a lunatic. What's going on there? I'm peaceful. I've done my revolution. Now I'm conquering some stuff in Ethiopia and failing miserably. Who cares?
Yeah.
And in this, Hitler comes and just blows it up, really, to 11, basically. Like Stalin, I look at Stalin this way. He was a necessary evil. Yes, he was. It would be extremely hard to win the war if he didn't help win the war. In fact, as we know, the Eastern Front, super important. Yes. He had the most losses. He committed the most men, the most material. I mean, Russia is the greatest combatant in a way. And yet he's not a good guy.
Stalin? Right? No, he's not a good guy. I can confirm.
So here's what I'm trying to get at. None of these people were good people in a way. They're not it's one of those wars. Everything is dirty. Everything you touch is just bleh, Maybe Churchill was less so, and FDR
I've heard criticisms, very strong criticisms of both actually, especially FDR recently.
But not as bad as the other.
Well, no, FDR didn't round anybody up. The Japanese, but he didn't execute anybody. So
it was bad. It shouldn't have happened.
No, the duplicitous idea is very correct. It's if you look at everything in black and white. It's one of the big reasons I started this channel in the first place. Everybody recently, these internet historian guys are like, this guy was right and this guy was wrong, and I'm like, it's not that simple, man.
Yeah. And one thing they're all doing that really jogs, kind of messes with me. Maybe because I've been reading history the old-fashioned way. I don't know. Maybe I'm the one in the wrong here. I'm not an historian. I respect a lot of these guys. And I don't know. But seeing old events by new lights, to me, just does not compute.
It confuses me because why are you constantly trying to find a new angle to look at it from? What was wrong? It's the first angle, the broad angle might be the most accurate or correct one. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, some of it's revisionist and some of it's what I do. I like digging into the stuff that I research to find the actual truth of it. Maybe that's what drives them, but I think that it drives them a little too far often to look at people or places or things, since we're talking about your country. If someone wanted to say the Salazar guy he wasn't neutral, he was evil. And they could frame it that way, and they could write a book where they find every single thing that Portugal ever did that helped the Germans, and then that would be the new norm. And then a generation of kids would learn, wow, he's kind of a Nazi. Oh, he's a Nazi.
But then, you know what would happen? What would happen, would be that once they find the truth, so once they say, oh, after all, this guy's kind of did a few good things here, because here's reality check, guys. No one that is mildly sane is all good or all evil.
Agreed.
These are cartoon characters.
Well, that's human. I think it's human nature to some extent to boil down your enemies to a cartoon character. Look at America right now.
But it does not help, because you yourself get, you get, when you get a distorted perception of reality, it's called, what do they call it? It's a cognitive distortion, basically. You just get bad information, then you get, if you get bad data, bad reasoning, right? It's kind of like that here as well. And I'm not going to say, hey, Salazar, please come back. Fuck that. No, I don't want it. I don't want that kind of regime on my life. No,
I think in historical context, knowing Germans who knew Germans at the time, it's interesting to see, they didn't look at Hitler all bad even after the war. They were like, well, he did do, he gave us our holidays and he brought the country out of its thing. Now that's their perspective, right? But that's what's interesting to me.
It's the whole
part of the history, in my opinion, that people need to pay attention to, and the whole reason I actually suggested this topic today is the perception of the people in the places is to some extent the history, because that's what drove their motive. That was their motivation, so it drove their actions. So
yes, I got to say that older people had a more balanced view of it all.
That way, because it was closer, so they remember the nuance, the grays. The farther away from the gray you get, the more black and white it looks, I think.
Yes, I think all of the guys today have a much more extreme, more
polarized, sensationalist, some might say, but
yes, absolutely.
It sells, and it might get them a spot on a documentary as a talking head.
Oh, are we going?
I'm just saying that has a lot to do with my opinions on how people handle things. Is that, is it intentional or is it part of?
I think sometimes
or is it part of the culture? But if you read, there are still guys writing books that are quite balanced.
Very much. The ones I'm very much. I like to read the British historians about the Second World War. Usually, they're very good. Many of them are incredibly balanced, and they have a overarching general idea. Like, for example, let's talk a little bit about books. I recommend completely Richard Evans' trilogy of the Third Reich, because it has an amazing work. It shows you the social life, the economy in depth. So it gives you that, like, oh shit, wait a minute. These guys were humans. Holy crap. Kind of deal, you know? Oh shit, oh, this happened this way? Oh, I thought they were just, just appeared out of thin air, completely Nazi.
One day Hitler stepped out of his house and then everyone saluted him.
And it's like, oh, so this was like a gradual thing. You got there, the boil the frog bullshit thing, which is true. Happens, and this is how it happened. And these three books really give you a good perspective on major aspects of German history at that time. So what preceded the war, the economy, the social life, and all that, and then during the war. And they're very comprehensive. They're really, they're really good.
I have not read them, but I should.
I recommend them. Audio versions are really good as well, by the way. So I recommend them. They're really, really nice. Also, Max Hastings, Anthony Beaver. I know they're all cliches. Max Hastings is
old tool, right? He's like right after the war historian.
Man, this I loved his book about Churchill. I loved it. It was super refreshing. Like, he was able to do a fair portrait without glorifying him, showing him like, hey, this is rotten. This was cool.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like I said, making him a human being with flaws and quality, virtues and stuff like that. People always like to say, "Oh, he was against the woman's vote." Yeah, well, it's true. Of course, he was.
Time. So, what's your point? He was a normal person, not an outlier, not a progressive political person.
This guy was a journalist covering the last charge of Spies in South Africa, or some crap like that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, people were still charging with fucking spears or some shit. This guy was like covering the event as a news. I mean, what? This guy was old, and this is people forget this a lot. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses. Just kind of, guys, please contextualize it. Please see
context
what was going on
is super important, and I think that was something we can talk more about in the future on a million things. Like, I think the whole damn thing boils down to that. Really, it's so agreed. For what we were trying to figure out about where you're from. Luckily, not as much of that. So in future stuff, we'll be talking about more hardcore stuff. I'm actually kind of glad to hear what you said about where you're from. That you were able to stay insulated, that there was a little bit of spy stuff, but that it didn't, there wasn't mass starvation. I assume you didn't have as much food as you wanted to, but people weren't dying.
No, I don't think so. It was bad. It's a sour taste in our memory, but it's a bitter taste. That's what I meant, in our memory. But there was some propaganda on the streets, especially in the main cities. There were posters, yes, like war effort and stuff like that. And be careful with what you say, because this is a spy city, and then of course that kind of thing had to, But overall, we weren't really participants.
That's good.
I'm sure after I read this spy book about Lisbon in the war, I will have much more to say about it. But yeah.
Well, that's good. I
out of perception, it was kind of a mild thing.
That's good, because I don't think if I interview or we, because it'll actually be the both of us, if we discuss this with any people from other countries, like I'd like to do one on Holland. As people conquered countries versus that's a much different story.
There's a proximity there that's really inescapable.
And lots of other. I mean, we both have met lots of people from all these countries, and Germans and all these guys will have much different opinions. So I think it's nice we started on one that wasn't terrible, as far as perception. It didn't mold your perceptions a whole lot. The last thing I'll just kind of ask is that the Germans are bad, Americans are good mentality that, I mean, I think even in the EU, they would tell you that you're supposed to think that way. Allies are good, Germans are bad guys, bad people. Now, we've already talked about context. Do you feel like that there's, in your culture, is that normal? Is that the same? Okay, kind so you guys, yes. It's still pervasive in your culture. It doesn't necessarily mean that you believe it, but it is still the right thing.
No, it's been changing because, as you know, now the United States are Satan.
Yeah,
so
we know.
But
we noticed.
In
the perspective of the war, Germans were evil and they murdered everyone, and they
like I grew up like that. That was now things are a little bit different. But all you have to say, like, same as the rest, because globalization, right? Internet and stuff. So things are now just more homogeneous, I would say.
Yeah.
Right. Which means like every and anyone jumps to the word Nazi easier.
Yeah, but the word Nazi right now doesn't mean what it should mean. It just means white guy.
Exactly. But back in the day, when I was growing up, it was serious. Like,
I remember I have this weird memory, and I don't even know why it happened, but in fourth grade, I think she was my fourth grade teacher, we had a big white piece of paper on the back wall of our classroom, and I drew a swastika for some reason. I'd seen one somewhere. And Mrs. Goodwin, my teacher, was like, "Do you even know what that means?" She's like, "My husband fought to keep you from, to kill those guys." And or maybe she worded it like they tried to kill my husband or something. I had no idea what it was, because kids just draw things they see. But that's how it was handled. This would be 1986 or so, probably. I don't know when you and I are roughly the same age. I don't remember when I was in fourth grade, but in the mid 80s. And it was like almost like a hand slap with a ruler. If you even accidentally. Because, her husband at that time would have been in his late 50s probably, so he's still a relatively functioning member of society. You just didn't do that. That's how it was handled.
Same kind of thing here, less visceral, I would say, but very frowned upon. Very, very, very frowned upon. So, like, Nazis, big hubbub.
But also, no, you didn't.
Like, I remember...
Go ahead.
the first, every country has neo-Nazis, right?
I guess I've met.
They're like
Yeah,
oddity,
I've met a couple of punk kids that were like the oi punk Nazi kids. I didn't know how to deal with them, but yeah, I think they do.
Yeah, we have our own, like a few. And what I'm trying to say is every country has extreme right-wing white supremacist dudes. Yeah. It's a big population. Any given number, there will be a percentage of these people, right? So it's like flat earthers and so on and so forth. So
wait, the earth isn't flat?
So what I'm trying to say is when the first guys started like really doing some disturbing shit over here, which they did, I'm sorry about that, which they did, news was so big, everyone was so shocked.
Yeah, I can actually remember in the early 2000s or late 90s when I would see things about white nationalist rallies in Europe. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. It was like, what? And plus, this also ties in with one of our first topics today, which was the whole thing with hiding symbols. So they had been festering and gathering their own, the flags from Germany and hiding them under the bed and getting the T-shirts out and making tattoos in hidden places. And all of a sudden they pop out and, oh shit, they just drop out of thin air. No, you asshole, they've been here all along because these people exist and we can't deny that they exist. And guess what? They were just hiding because you don't want to see them.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Now you don't know how many there are.
If you made it completely normalized, normalized is a bad word, but if you allowed normal people,
no one would normalize it.
No.
Come on.
No, what I'm saying is if you allowed these people to have their flags, like right now, that would not fly in this country, but if you allowed someone to be a legitimate Nazi who was like, I want to do Nazi things, and debate, they should in theory be crushed very quickly. Anti-Semitism in this country, any idiot can talk that argument down very quickly. So
see what I mean? Plus the social cost will be enormous.
Well, it would. Yes. So, but I would prefer that. I mean, that's the same topic as earlier, but a little bit more intense. But everyone gets why it was banned or why you. But
absolutely.
You should, in theory, think that we've grown as a population or as a world population. That if someone comes back with, remember that thing Hitler did, we're gonna do it better this time. You should in theory be laughed off the stage if you're in a political discourse. It should not work. They should be like, no. I mean, you can let the guy talk and just be like, nah, man, that's horrible. What are you talking about? But that's not the case.
It's not going to be the case. No, I'm not saying that we're never in danger, for sure.
Well, right now more than ever, I think if people continue to suppress right-wing people,
not only let's just say for example there are certain governments in the world where that is actually happening. I'm not talking about the US because that's
corporately right now I think that's a bigger issue, Twitter and Facebook and stuff.
Yes, corporately is pretty bad. But let's say for example China, that guy just made himself dictator for life. I didn't
see that story.
What?
But
something like that. It's
okay.
Fairly poorly worded, but kind of he made himself, okay, I'm just in charge of this until I die. So that's, for all intents and purposes, just dictatorship.
Yes. But, I mean, it's a Western idea that you should have term limits. Who are we? I mean, that's a totally different discussion, but one could look at it and say, well, why do they have to follow our rules?
Here's one thing. Like, guess what? Most people don't even know the difference between a tyrant and a dictator, right? They don't know where it comes from, the office of dictatorship. They don't know why it's there. There's a reason for that. The people that first did it, which obviously didn't realize it would be abused as it was, completely abused, and this is why it's dangerous, were the Romans. And the reason why they created that office was when there was a crisis, this big body of government, which was the Senate and the consuls, could not decide. Because guess what? We're humans, right? And could not decide in time to do anything effective. So they would name, a guy with all powers, both for legislation and military powers, and he would just enact laws, gather the legions, go fight the dudes or whatever, and solve the crisis. And then, in theory, he would step out of power, which you guys have a city called Cincinnati, named after the one main guy that did this. Cincinnatus. So he stepped out of power after dealing with a crisis in the time of the Republic. He gave his power back to the Senate, and he went to farm
That's
cabbages
not
or
human
whatever.
nature. That's an outlier.
That's not human nature.
Yeah.
That's not human nature. So this is why we have our systems these days. And well, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing we have. People diss on what we have a lot. I kind of think we're very good.
We are. I think
good.
a lot of people think that the time period, Second World War stuff, lots of more dictatory stuff, even in countries that weren't tyrannical, like you're talking about Portugal. Some people prefer that because it's the strong hand idea. What is it better to just, as long as, and that's kind of what the stuff with Trump is in the U.S., which again shouldn't get into that, but it's interesting to see because a lot of older people that lived through those times will say, I wish it was like it was back when we were doing this. Yeah.
Oh, they do, especially old people. They do. They still do. Listen, do you want to know a funny note? I think it was about 10 years ago. This was this series, this silly series for TV. The state TV wanted to do something with journalism and history, and the documentary part of it was actually interesting, very interesting. So they did like the 10 vote on the greatest Portuguese ever, and they did like, I think it was 10 documentaries or 8 documentaries on 10 great Portuguese people, full biography, documentary, all of that. Really nice work. Including, of course, Salazar, one of them. And they included musicians, I think, poets. So they try to kind of win all the way and trying to find the best people. And guess who won? Salazar. So, as much as you want to say bad things about him, he was one of the greatest of the 20th century. Not by what he did to the people, which was really bad, but what he did for the country. So,
yeah, I mean,
it's about what are we measuring here?
Yep.
Experience? Oh, really bad.
Yes.
Right? Long-term effects? Oh, actually quite good.
And I think you can say that about a lot of the people in that time period, including Hitler himself, because I've had extensive discussions with Germans about things that he created that have outlasted the Third Reich that are still in place today. So, all of their paid holidays are primarily in place because Hitler put them in place. Now, some things that he did of that sort were very, very bad, but the majority of the way that those things work are still in place. So, he changed the country for a long time in a lot of ways before he was like, yo, I'm going to start invading people. So, we can bring on a German and discuss this at a later time, but because I'm no expert, but this was good. This was fun. If anybody watches it, hopefully they do. We're working this out. We're trying to figure out how it's going to go. So,
man, it was very.
If you have nice opinions or critiques, we're open to hearing it. Not on my hair or his beard, but on serious things. Topical ideas as well, and things we can do. We've got a bunch already, but let us know what you think, because we like doing this. We talk anyway a lot, so now we're doing it on the interwebs. So, all right, we're out.
All right.